All right. Excuse me, I'm trying to read chat and do different things too. Let me get back to the share screen. All right. So today we're talking about chapter 2, which is huge. If you've started your reading, you've figured that out already. And these are the guidelines that I have for you, just some notes that I've taken from your textbook. But we'll send these out to you, and you can have those. If you didn't get an invitation with them, you'll get those at the end. But there are 3 things that the book tells you at the beginning, and that is, you're not expected to know all these laws. You never will. But you're constantly to be on guard and to question and to look at books and stay alert of that. But ask yourself this thing: are you implementing regulations? Are you monitoring regulations? And are you foreseeing things that could possibly happen? And are you addressing those things? So that is what superintendents tell us in preparing you to become a principal. They say they don't need to know everything. They need to know 2 things: where to find it, and number 2, who to ask. And that is their biggest thing, is ask. So I remind you again that this class that you're taking now is the one that could wind you up on the front page of a very ugly newspaper. And we don't want that to happen. But most importantly, we want to make sure that you keep your staff protected and we keep your students safe. So in your reading, you're gonna cover tons and tons of laws. We'll talk about a few of those in a minute, but I want to tell you of an experience, first of all, that that I had, that I want to share with you so that you can kind of put it in context. You won't know every law at every minute. You can't possibly. There will be times that you have to refer back to your book and to look it up. But here's the thing: your sincerity at which you want to know those laws is what will carry you through. And that can't be clear any more than when you're dealing with EC. I had a situation where a parent was coming to an EC meeting with their advocate. I don't know if you've been in that situation or not, but that means that you better know your law, because the person coming to see you knows the law inside and out and up and down. It was my first year as a principal, and I took the class just like you. I had my book and I studied, but I couldn't remember and retain everything. Before the meeting, I made sure that everybody was going to be comfortable. I made sure that my seat was beside the parent's seat. And I made sure that my secretary knew not to interrupt during that meeting. Because if you've ever been in an IEP meeting with a lot of people, invariably the principal will get called out, get a telephone call, or an interruption. And there isn't anything that says I don't care about you to a parent like having an interruption like that during their meeting. So my point is that I went in, I introduced myself, and the first thing I said to the parent is this: I said, I don't know, I don't have a special needs child. I don't know what your life is like, but I am here to see that you and your child have a positive school experience, and that it's everything that you want it to be. So I may make mistakes. I may say things that aren't appropriate, but I want you to know up front that it's out of ignorance, and it's not out of, it's not out of an oversight of not trying. I want to know your side. I want to understand your life, but I need you to talk with me and share with me. So if we make mistakes, if we say things that are inappropriate or that are offensive, I need you to explain that to us so that we can learn from it. By the end of that meeting, the advocate turned to the parent and said, I'm going to have to leave for a minute because I don't think you realize how good you have it here at this school. She said, this principal and teacher have been presenting you with options and opportunities throughout, and every time you are defensive and you're arguing with them. They're not here to overrule you on anything. They're asking you what you need, what you want, how you feel. And so the advocate said, I'm going to get up just a minute and I'm going to stand out in the hall, and I want you, to the parent, to think about this. I am in a school where I have to fight, literally fight, to get anybody to listen to me about my child. And you have a whole team of people here that are asking you to talk about your child. I wanted to share that with you because I think if you don't take anything else away from school law, take that experience, because it is your attitude and it is your sincere desire to be within the law, to serve the people in your school. It's the sincerity at which you do that that will largely determine whether you're going to be successful or not. And that's all the parent can ask. Let's look at, you're going to get dizzy because I'll take you back to my screen. And let's look at this, the focus points of what you are reading or will be reading when you get into chapter 2. So the first one talks about when schools and districts fail to provide a safe place for students. That's when the law has to step in. So we want to be sure that we do everything we can to prevent them from coming in. But if there's a need that arises, that's when the law comes in. Laws are there to protect individuals. They guarantee the freedom of religion, of speech, of press, of assembly, and the right of everyone to come to the courts and the government to correct any injustice that's been committed. So as you go through that whole section, you'll learn that a law is a civil rule. They're based on assumptions that all citizens should be judged by the same standards of behavior. And you're going to read a lot about due process. And due process is the one that we want you to focus on the most. Because due process is if you're treating everybody fairly, if you're giving them the same type of punishment, the same amount of punishment for the same type of offense. And that's what due process. It's a system that you go through, and it explained very good in the textbook. But you have constitutional law, common law, statutory law, and administrative law. The constitutional law is the first one that you come across, I think, in your book. And it's the basic source of law based on constitutions. And those laws are so broad that they've only been amended 26 times in 200 years. Now, what we come down to next are state legislation, and the state laws are much more detailed. And the legislative branch makes the laws, the judicial branch interprets the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws. But state legislature has absolute power to make laws governing education. The Constitution doesn't govern public school. It's state law that governs public school. You have, let's see, another important part. First Amendment. The First Amendment provides the personal freedom to the citizens of the United States, and it's a lot of times the basis of litigation within schools. I'm going to show you this list of court cases that is on the website. This is on, it's in Zoom 2 folder, I believe. These are all the court cases that are mentioned in Chapter 2. It goes into great detail. And then this side over here is the Cliff Notes version of that case. And these are the ones that you need to be familiar with. And particularly when you go in and take your, for those of you in South Carolina that want to take the praxis, your study guide will probably take you through these courses. The 14th Amendment is the one that deals with race, gender, ethnic background issues. And most recently, it's been used in cases of individuals with disabilities and with school finance issues. So this amendment guarantees the right of citizens to due process under law, and it's been used to support school employees' claims of wrongful discharge, as well as parents' claims of unfair treatment of students. So when you read through the text or go back through it, be sure and notice it from the different perspectives, because as your principal, you'll look at this one way. A teacher will look at it another way. And now I want to ask you to look at it from the chair of the principal, because you know, that's what you're training to do. So this is a really important resource that you have in that Zoom folder that I wanted to point out to you. I'm jumping around, but these are all things that are thrown in that folder, and Dr. Whitaker and I are afraid there's so many of them because you're doing 2 weeks in one that you won't know what they are. This one is in there, and it's called the Assessment Inventory. You are not asked to do anything specifically with this, I don't believe. The regular session students have to do this assessment of their school as one of their discussion boards. But this is something that you might want to do, again, for intern hours. You might want to do and see if your principal will let you share this information with the school safety team or school improvement team. But this is a safe, orderly, and caring schools physical environment checklist. And this is one used in North Carolina. And if you look at the different areas, you can learn so much about your school, not just by what you learned last week by looking at the crisis plan, but look at this assessment also. You'll be amazed when you walk through your school at all of these things that are on here. You're looking at the equipment, you're looking at the devices, you're looking at the how traffic flows, how the safety inside, or the fire evacuation plans posted. Now, in my school, I had to do this monthly, and that's a system regulation for sure. But talk to your principal if you get a chance. You might want to take this, a copy of this, from your Blackboard folder and discuss it with your assistant principal or principal and see what you do at your school, what they're required to do in your school. Let's see. You have the court cases. All right, let's go back to this one. Okay. So just glancing through to see if any of these others jump out. You should all be familiar with IDEA. Anybody that has EC kids, of course, whether you don't have to be an EC teacher, but from a teacher's perspective, these are areas that I would think EC that you're pretty sure about. But right under that, there is a section of reportable offenses. This is for North Carolina, but in your folder on Blackboard, I put another, that's about, I think it's maybe 50 or 60 pages. That's a South Carolina provision. But what I want to explain to you is that there are certain offenses that happen in your school, and here they are right here. So you have assault resulting in seriously bodily injury, assault involving the use of a weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, and so forth. Then you have these that are called acts of crime. There's others listed there. These are listed pretty good in your handouts. But what I wanted to explain to you is that these right down here, right above the red print, like making bomb threats, willfully burning a school building, unlawful and underage sales provision. These are all offenses that a principal is required by law to report. Failure to report or properly investigate will result in a Class 2 misdemeanor and loss of your administrative license. So I know that I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to point out the things to you that you really need to focus on when you're looking at these resources in your folder and when you're reading Chapter 2. Because the thing that you may not understand is that you not only may lose your license if you don't know some of these laws, but you can also, it can also go against you as a Class 2 misdemeanor. And those are really good. See all of these links that I've given you in this handout? These are really good links that you can go in this summer. You don't have to do them this week for the class, but you owe it to yourself to spend some time with this and go through and look at what these are. Another interesting thing, I keep referring you back to your administrator, but it's great to be able to sit down with your administrator and just ask them, so where do you keep your list of reportable offenses, and what are you required to do, and how do you report those? And they can tell you what your system, there's certain things we all do, either by North Carolina law or by South Carolina law or by Georgia law, whatever the state law requires. But then within the systems, there are other things that your system requires. So I've tried to give you some extra resources for those. All right, let's go to Blackboard and look at that for just a minute. And so I can show you where some of these things are. This is all you have in your folder 2. You have the court cases that I showed you, and that is simply the one that has all the lists of the court cases that you need to be familiar with. So what I recommend that you do with this is find these in your book and put the page number out by them, so that, if you're studying for your test later, or that you know that you'll be familiar with these. Okay, this is the one I was talking to you about, that this is Dale's top 10. Dale is Dr. Lamb. If you haven't met him, he's a character. And he came up with a list of the top 10 things that administrators and teachers should know. And these are the ones that that I was just talking about. And he's so funny because he'll put them on here like this. I have to go back to that other sheet we were looking at a minute ago to tell you what some of these acronyms stand for. But these are the reportable offenses that when No Child Left Behind came in, they required that we report these. And if you had so many of these, then your school could be declared unsafe. And if it was, then there were certain things that parents had a right to do to move their students if they were in an unsafe school. In North Carolina, we put it in Power School and had to do a discipline report. What happened was, all of a sudden, it changed a little bit as to, was it really a suspension? Or if I don't call it a suspension, I don't have to report it as a suspension. You know, so there were several things that started happening, and schools would come out and have this great report, and it looked like that was the best place to be. But if you lived in the community, you knew there were things from your own children or your neighborhood children. You knew there were things with handguns on campus, fights, drugs, different things that weren't being properly reported. So that's where all of this comes in, and that's where it gets really sticky. So they've come full circle now, and I think we finally got that straightened out as to what offenses are reported. But your school, how you rate things, what happens at your school is it's pretty important. And then I think that's all that, the other two things were the things specifically for South Carolina that I added to that just this week. So you'll have that. All right, I'm gonna hop back to full screen, and go back over. Are there any specific questions as you went through your text that you, or things that surprised you?
I'm not sure.
I can tell you my big surprise when I took the big chair of a principal is that I had no idea I was responsible for everything in here. I took school law, just like you, but in the middle of school law, you're taking about, you know, all the other courses, and you're doing all the other things, and you're juggling everything. And somehow, I kind of thought when I moved into the office as a principal that I would have more guidance as to what the law was. So I think I told you last week, learned really quick that you need a good mentor, and if your system doesn't assign you one, you need to find one, somebody that you can trust to ask those sorts of things. But the first time I had a student do something on a school bus that I wanted that student, I didn't want the student back in the school building, and didn't have time, you know, didn't know what the legal course to go through. And so I knew exactly who to call, and he told me the wording that I needed to use, and I was able to contact the parents that night, make the suspension immediate, a summarily suspension right then, and then we had our meeting the next day. But the main thing was that when the students returned to campus the next day, my reputation in the community with the parents was safe, because if that student had been allowed, because of the incident, if the student had been allowed to return to school, it doesn't matter if I turned around that afternoon and suspended him for, 3 months. The damage was done when the parents that came to school the next morning to see if he was going to be allowed back in the school. That's what it's all about. So that's the other thing that Dr. Whitaker and I want to stress to you is the biggest thing you can do is think proactively. She gave me a good example to share with you about something that happened in her school. It was late one afternoon. It was about 5:30, and these parents came storming in her office, and she was just about to go home, and they started ranting and raving about a teacher that she tripped their son, and they knew she did, and the son was a challenging behavior student. So she, Ms. Whitaker thought, Dr. Whitaker thought, okay, well, we'll get to the bottom of this tomorrow. But the parents were insisting right now. So Dr. Whitaker tried to contact the teacher. She couldn't. So she just kept assuring the parents, I know, Mr. So-and-so, I've worked with him for years. He loves his students, and, I'm sure whatever happened, he'll be able to explain it to us tomorrow. The parents wouldn't listen. Finally, she just had to let him go. There was nothing more she could do. They were just going around in circles, so they went home. But she turned around, picked up the phone, and called the chairman of the school board. In my system, I would have called the superintendent and the chairman of the school board. So you kind of know your system, right? She called the chairman of the school board, and she said, I want you to know this just happened this afternoon. I'm trying to investigate it, but I can't. I can't get in touch with the teacher. The parents will not listen. They don't want to wait. They want the teacher fired tonight. And they want me to put it on the news. So I want you may get some phone calls. By the next morning, these parents were military parents, and they had contacts all over the world. By the next morning, the story went out all over the nation about this teacher at this school that tripped their student, their child, and that the principal wouldn't do anything, and the school board wouldn't do anything, and it was an absolute mess. But because Dr. Whitaker contacted the school board, they were prepared for it when they got bombarded by the telephone call from the news saying, I understand that there's been an incident at such and such a school, and your principal is not listening to the parents, won't investigate, and that the teacher hasn't been reprimanded. So immediately, the school board knew exactly what to say, because Dr. Whitaker had filled them in. So they were able to give the news the true story. Now, the bad news is it turned out that the teacher really did trip the student. It was one of those rare things that happens that just completely lost, he just completely lost it. And so it's middle school, it happened, but because of the way it was handled in the end, everything came out, and the parents and the teacher and the school board and the principal, it was all reconciled. Appropriate apologies were made, an understanding of how wrong it was, but how it happened, why it happened. But my point is that had she not thought through that and picked up the phone and warned the school board, how differently things could have been when the newspaper called. And with all these accusations, things going around, on Facebook and on the internet, and the school board had no idea. So when we're talking about all of these things with school law, that's the main thing we want you to be aware of, is you have to think about 5 steps ahead. And from that story, gather several things that, yes, always back your staff, but never back yourself into a corner, because always know that there are exceptions. So, so don't be the judge and the jury until you have all the information and all the details of what you're talking about. So hang on just a minute. Okay. So we're going to go to move you out of the way. All right. I'm going to send you the rest of the information that I shared with you, and the handouts. I apologize. If you receive an invitation to a Zoom and you respond and we know you're coming, then if we have things that we're sharing that night, we can we can send them to you. Tonight was a little jumbled up for some reason. I'm not sure what the cross up was on the Zoom. But we wanted to give you some time to ask any questions that you have on the OMA. Do any of you, are you having problems with it? Do you have any questions about it? It's a really fast turnaround.
No, ma'am, no question. Just follow the rubric. So.
Okay. If you run into any problems getting any of your documents, South Carolina, you have a document called the climate. It's a climate analysis. If you can get that in South Carolina from your principals before school's out, you'll be using that on the OMA, and you'll use it on your next artifact too, but it's called the school climate analysis. And that'll help you a lot. All right.
I have a question, Dr. Z.
Sure.
The artifacts. Were we doing so much turnaround and having, we can't meet with a POC.
Right.
What kind of artifacts can we submit?
Can you give me more specific? Like you're working on the OMA right now. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so on the OMA, in the first part of the OMA, let's see, if you don't mind, I'll just open this up and we'll go back to screen share so you can all see what I have on the OMA.
I saw the suggestions, but with the quick turnaround and getting other people involved in conferences and electronic and video conferences, it's just impossible.
All right, I'm not sure that on the OMA you're going to need to do that, because on the OMA what you're doing in the beginning, and let's see, this is what you're doing on the beginning. Yeah. What you're doing on the beginning of the OMA, it's more like a report that you're doing on your school.
Okay.
So you're going to start out and you're just walking through all of the important things about your school. You're looking at your the leadership of your school. You start out with the school climate, and you talk about.
I don't have that information. Where is that located?
In my head.
That template. I don't have that template.
I'll be glad to share it with you. It's these are just notes that I have that I've made over the time there. The OMA template itself is supposed to be on with your internship coach and your internship shell, but I'll be glad to share it with you. This is from where I coach, with my students that I coach. Let's just keep it our little secret between you and me.
Okay. I will. And
I'll be glad to share this with you. But this is a coach thing that I use, and I don't mind you using it, because here's the thing. when a superintendent asked me to do a report, they never asked me to bring it from out of the air. They usually gave me a template to work from. So I'll send this out to both groups tonight after our meeting. But all I did was go through and just tell you that, first of all, you're looking at your school in the community. Shady Brook Elementary is one of 5 elementary schools in the community of Kannapolis. It is the 3rd smallest. Then compare it to the system. It is a member of the Kannapolis school system. Kannapolis is such and such a size. Then compare that to the state. So that's what you're going to be doing all throughout the OMA. It is an analysis of the organizational management analysis. So you're looking at your school as a business. How do you operate? So you start out by looking at where you sit in the culture. Then you look at what makes up your school. So what are the demographics? What are the demographics of the students? And be specific. I want to hear 23%. I want to hear 15%. I don't want to hear most of our students are free and reduced lunch. And then you go to your staff. 10% of our staff have national board certified teachers. We have a 13% turnover rate. You are giving us a picture of your school in words. And you're comparing it to the district and the state and the nation. There's also a handout in one of those Zoom 1 continued, or Zoom 2. But because you're such an attentive group, I'll find it and send it to you. There is one handout that talks about laws of instructional time. And that's like how many minutes of planning time and so forth. And these are for North Carolina, I think. But I'll send it to you and it'll give you an idea, because that's what you're doing in the OMA. You're saying that our school is in compliance with state law because we meet X number of minutes a day or so many days a year. And you're being specific of those. And I think last week we shared a calendar comparison with you that showed North Carolina, South Carolina, how many days, or it may, and if you didn't get a copy of it last week, it'll be on your Zoom 1 folder. But go through there before you start looking at it and open up every one of those things and see what those resources are, because they're there to help you with the OMA. Then when you get to OMA 2, it's a copy and paste of the APTEL. APTEL 1, 2, and 3 are the same thing as OMA 2. You're just going to change the language a little bit. So instead of saying APTEL, it'll say OMA. When you get to that part, I think you'll see what I'm talking about, or your coach can show you. And then OMA 3 is about building a master schedule and analyzing a schedule. But the first one, OMA 1, is not done so much with a group as it is just a report of your school, your leadership. How's the leadership made up in your school? Is it a principal, an assistant principal? Do you have 3 assistant principals? Who's next in command? Who supervises the classroom teachers? Bring up your duties. Who does duty? Who has duty? Do you have a custodian? How is your cafeteria operate? So you're looking at how your school operates. So look at it from inside, step outside into your schoolyard, into your school community, out into your state, and out into the nation. Making those comparisons and showing how you are falling within the legal guidelines that you're supposed to be following. But I will share this document right here without my name on it and let you. It's coaching document. I'll let you look at that, and that'll help you a lot with the OMA. But the OMA is a long document. I wouldn't be surprised if it's, I wouldn't even say how many pages. You're just like students, because when we say 2, then you got to do exactly 2. It could be 20 pages. It could be 15 pages. It just depends on your school, the size of it, the complexity of it.
And this must be done by Friday.
You are an add-on?
Yes.
Yes. Your first draft is done by Friday. So you'll be, you can go back and add to it. I had one that I just worked with somebody on, where they wrote the paper and they didn't put in like the percentages, like I was talking about, the specifics. Like she said, hardly any of our staff are national board. Well, that's not appropriate at the end. But for a draft, hardly any is good, because she went through and highlighted that, then she knows she's got to find that statistic.
Okay.
So for the draft that you're doing, if you need to come back and add some charts later and some percentages later, but get the basics, get as much as you can in there. But if you have a school report card, teacher working condition survey, the school analysis, climate analysis from South Carolina. In South Carolina, your principals at different schools and different systems will have other documents. If you tell them what you're looking for a report of the statistics, basically, of your school, how it's made up. So think about it. When if you go to a real estate site, a lot of times they'll have links on there to different schools, and they'll have stats about your school. They might have your test scores, or they might have your things about your staff, or they'll have things about your system, the age, years of experience, that sort of thing. So those are the things you want to gather first, and then sit down, take the weekend, and write it. Or in this case, take it Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday.
Okay.
But your coach will be glad to help you with that. And if you're in Dr. Whitaker's class, she's offering an office hour, I think, for you. If you're in my class, I just do it on demand. So you ask me a question, I'll answer you individually. By text, phone, email. Just don't hesitate to send us. Let us help you. That's what we're here for. Okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else I can help you with before we say farewell?
No, ma'am.
Dr. Z, just thinking forward, working on competencies this semester, are we focusing on competencies for the OMA as well as the SIP?
Let me show you something about competencies. And if the rest of you, if you have had enough tonight, you're welcome to check out. But I'm going to share screen again and take you to the competency folio, because there's a really important reason why we haven't given you a definite list. And I'll show you exactly why, if you'll bear with me just a minute.
Okay.
And if I promise to send you anything and I don't send it to you, you just send me an email and I will. Let's go to test string. We're going to go to test string. You could probably see it before I can. There we go.
Damn. Yeah, we'll get the winning now.
Okay, so I'm going to show you a competency folio. it looks like this. When you click on communication, for example, do you see right here where my error is? It says 3 evidences: APSL, SIAP, and open-ended.
Yes.
Yes.
So because you're coming from different groups, some of you maybe overlooked the APSL when you did communication example on the APSL in the beginning, you see?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're coming at us from different places. So we'll give you a list of all of the ones that have the SIAP. Let's see, are you doing the SIAP or the SIP?
We'll be doing a SIP.
The SIP. So we'll look for the ones that have the OMA and the SIP and the beginning of the CAP, because for the add-ons. But you're not going to have to do all of them. But eventually, you have to have 3 for every one. So what I tell my interns to do is this: start with communication. If you haven't done one one of these that came from the APSL, do that one. If you haven't done your open-ended one, you can do that one. And then go to the next one. So when it comes to OMA Task 4, you'll be given a specific list. And the list is going to be the competencies that have OMA right here in their description. But some of you may have already, addressed that as an open-ended or for whatever reason. So we want to make sure you knock out all the ones that have OMA.
Okay.
But it's a good time to go back and pick up. You've already done APSL. You've already done APTEL. So if for some reason you overlooked those competencies, now's a good time to do them.
Okay.
And go through it this summer and do just what I did. Open each one. But as far as the OMA 4, we'll give you a definite list. If you're a master's student, you'll have a definite list. But if you're an add-on, you were told each time to do 21 competencies. So you're all at different places. So we don't know exactly which of these to tell you to do.
Okay.
Does that explain it for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody else have a question about the competency folio while we're here, or task stream? And there you are again.
And so the OMA is due Friday, right?
Or, let's look. For masters, OMA task and rubric. Task 1 and start task 2. You start your peer reviews. So it's due for a peer review. The add-on group, you're completing task 1 and starting task 2. Did I answer your question, Alex?
Yes, ma'am. Friday, yes.
You can have a look.
Yeah.
All right. So what I was saying to the master's students is, yes, you need to finish yours so that your peer review can start. But it may not be perfect. You may have some blanks in there. You may have to go back and add some things later. But at least get it going so that you have a draft of it, so that your peer review can start saying, well, I think you need to have more of this or more of that.
And you said that that's due Friday. I thought we said last week it was due Sunday.
All right, let's see.
For masters.
Masters is due.
That's right. It's Sunday. That's true. You're right.
Yes, it is. June 3rd?
Yes, that's Sunday. Yes, that's Sunday. Yes.
June 3rd.
I got the days mixed up.
Yeah, if you could see everybody that I see and you see that look of panic. And I work with several groups, so it's really hard for me to keep it up without it in front of me. But you can do this. If I had to do one this time of year, that you're going to be on such a tight schedule, I would rather it be this one than anything else. Because just like what you were talking about, if you ask a group, a PLC, to meet with you in the next week, you probably just going to lose every friend you ever had. Every friend. Because nobody has time for that, including you. But you have plenty of time that you can stay up till midnight, and you're young enough to do that. So it's just writing it. It's just researching it. But I do think, I talked to some interns today, I do think if you gather as much information from your principal as you can and download it, and then sit down at the desk with it spread all around you, then it'll flow much easier. It's if you sit down and try to write it, and then it's like, oh, where's the climate survey? And where's if you're a Title I school, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, it doesn't matter. Title I reports have all this information in it. If you've done a SACS accreditation or an advanced ed accreditation, that report has a lot of this in it. If you are in school improvement, you have tons of reports at your school, and it has all this information in it. Many superintendents require these types of things. So do some talking to the folks at your school and find out what you have available that you can pull this information out of. It'll go much faster.
And I understand that, Dr. Z, but when we compare our school we compare it to the district, we still have to know what the district has, and also to the nation, what the average middle school, like I'm a middle school, so what the average middle school has.
So look up statistics on middle schools in America.
Okay.
Okay. And you're going to find all kinds of ratings. So it'll say ranked by size, ranked by, it might even have ranked by reportable offenses, like we were talking about today, ranked by income. Don't get hung up on that.
Okay.
I would rather you do it and have an evaluator send it back and say, well, you didn't compare it to the nation. Then you get hung up on that.
Okay.
The rubric says in context. So if you can't give us a specific, then you know yourself the context of your school. I knew I was in, by most standards, one of the smaller elementary schools. I knew I was in one of the poorer elementary schools. I knew I had 2 housing projects, within one school. So that was big for our system. So geographically, how it was made up. So those are the things that I'm talking about. Context. Your school can look one way on paper, but when you take that school and place it in your neighborhood and you start showing the landscape around it, and then you look at your district, you may look totally different. Okay?
Okay.
It may, for example, teacher turnover rate. The teacher turnover rate at my school the first 2 years was atrocious. I mean, it was like, I want to say 16%. The reason is because teacher turnover rate comes when teachers leave. So I had 4 that retired, but that counts against you. If they leave to take a higher position, if they're a teacher assistant and they're moved into a teaching position, so that had to be put into context. Because when I turned that into my annual school report, my teacher turnover rate looked like that principal's doing something to run everybody off. But when you looked at the actual people who left because they just wanted to leave, it was 1. So not 1%, just 1 person. So so that's what I mean by context, Alex. It's
okay.
It's look at your school Not just give us the numbers, but tell us where those numbers came from. Okay.
All right.
I read a really good one this morning, and the person who wrote it talked about how there was a real a hard time in their system, in their area, that they were geographically in a rural area, and that the vacancies for positions, they couldn't fill them. And so they had an unusual amount of inexperienced teachers, because they would come, they would work for 2 or 3 years. The conditions weren't so good, and then they had 3 years experience and they would go on to somewhere else. That needed to be explained. So the reader isn't thinking, so why do you have such a young staff? Why don't you have more experienced staff? So that's what I mean when I say put it in context. Explain it to your reader so they understand where those numbers come from. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
You've been an awesome group. Thanks for your patience earlier with the whatever happened. Somebody was given a great lesson. But if I can help you in any way, please don't hesitate to send me an email. I will send you the documents right now that I promised. And Dr. Whitaker is there if you need her. And I know that Dr. Tillman is also available for office time if you need her. But I will send you my OMA notes. Just they magically appeared in your email box and you don't know where they came from. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. You guys have a great night. Don't worry about it. You've got this. I know you do. We'll help you through it. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.